If you haven't, you're welcome to go ahead and go. I do want to give our speaker tonight an introduction. Rusty Hilliard was born in Dyersburg, Tennessee. He is a 1995 graduate of the Tennessee School for the Blind in Nashville, Tennessee. And for those of you who are wondering why several of us are wearing yellow, Rusty can see the color yellow. And Richard Primo really went all out tonight. And I don't think anybody could miss Richard. I thought that was awesome. Rusty holds associate degrees from Dyersburg State Community College. He is also a 2003 graduate of Freed-Hardeman University and holds a BS in Biblical Studies. Rusty met Delaney while at Freed-Hardeman and was blessed beyond belief when she agreed to be his wife and best friend. They were married on December 27th, 2003 and have 2 children, Katie, who's 13 going on 30, and Hadley, 11, and a character all her own. The Hilliards have worked with congregations in Dyersburg, Tennessee, Newberry, Florida, Bartow, Florida, in their current position with the Central Church of Christ in Haines City. And then he wrote something ugly, very dirty down at the bottom. You would think a man of God wouldn't write something like this. He put "Go Vols" down at the bottom. That's terrible. Terrible. But we are so glad to have Rusty. I love him. He is not only an amazing man of God, he's a good friend, and just so glad he's in the area, and we appreciate you coming to speak to us tonight, buddy. Let me give you his theme tonight as well. Of course, for those of you who may be visiting, we are going through a study, and basically what we're looking at are just some of the great texts from the Bible. And the text that he's been given tonight is 1 Corinthians chapter 13. What does love, or real love, really look like?
If you all will, I'd like to open with a word of prayer. Let's pray. Our Father and our God in heaven, Lord, we come before you at this time. And God, we are grateful for your word. We're thankful for the guidance it provides. We're thankful for the answers it offers. We're thankful for the ability that we have to search it out, to study it, to apply it, to share it. Father, tonight as we study this subject of love from your letter to the church at Corinth, God, I pray that you would help us to gain an understanding of what it is that the text is saying, how it applies to our lives, and the difference that it could make, not just in our individual lives, but in our congregational existence as well. God, we close by saying we love you, we thank you, we praise you. It's in Jesus' name that we do pray, and amen. I want to just say it's an honor. It really is a privilege to be here tonight. It was wonderful to be asked. It's always nice to be thought of, and I appreciate everyone who is in yellow, but my brother Richard may be wearing more yellow than I've ever seen in my entire existence. I've been blind since the age of 8. I ain't seen yellow like that in a long time. That is a prize-winning outfit right there. With that being said, listen, I have a tendency to go long. Let me get into this lesson before we get too much time passed. Maybe, just maybe, Bette Midler was on to something when she said, "Some say love, it is a river that drowns the tender reeds." Or, I don't know, it would be the first time in history that Barbra Streisand was right, but maybe she was. When she said love, soft as an easy chair. Maybe, just maybe, Lionel Richie, Diana Ross, as they sang those epic words that have been the backdrop for so many weddings and so many romantic occasions when they sang about my endless love. Or, I don't know, perhaps the J. Giles Band did really have it right whenever they sang, "Love Stinks." Who knows? Realistically, what we have been attempting and efforting to do since time out of mind is, as songwriters, as poets, as authors, even as ministers, we have been attempting to define what love really is. We've been searching for the right turn of phrase, the proper example. We've looked for illustrations, both high and low. And by and large, I would submit to you, we've not been super successful. As people, at times we've pointed to our spouses. We've looked at our houses. We've held our hand out and used our kids as examples, and even at times looked at our cars and says, yes, at last, this is what love is. But just to be honest, and if we're laying all things on the table here tonight, as a society, we have missed the mark so badly. In the world in which we live, in the society in which we live, let's narrow it down, in the country in which we live, love has taken a beating. Husbands abuse their wives and walk out on their families. Wives forsake their marriage vows and leave behind their husbands. Moms and dads the world over bring precious tiny infants into this great big world and then promptly fail to provide for them physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Brethren, as a people, we have failed at love. However, I am thankful, grateful. I am immeasurably over the top excited to report to you that as the church, we've got the whole thing figured out. We have no problems. We have no divisions among us. Splits are a thing of the past. Disagreements are something that can only be dreamed of and imagined at this point. Love abounds in our fellowship. There is nothing but roses and rainbows all around. When visitors come and participate and enjoy our fellowship, they leave knowing, indeed, we have encountered true love and it is found at the Lord's church. As a minister, I go to sleep each night comforted in the fact that love, well, that's just one subject I don't have to preach to the church about. Quick question. Anybody knows, is my nose growing yet? Because I'm not going to break any big news here for you. As the church, we're still missing it as well. We still have problems. There are still divisions among us. There are still arguments, fights. There's still disagreements and debates. Unfortunately, what I'm driving at is that by and large, as the church, we've missed the boat on love as well. We have a hard time showing it to those who are inside our fellowship, and if you don't mind me being so bold, we're having trouble showing it to those outside our fellowship as well. As a minister, I'll frequently get caught up in the conversation of, well, Rusty, why is the church not growing? And look, truth is you could point to a lot of different issues that the church has. We could point to a multitude of problems that we face today, some of which we've brought upon ourselves, others of which it's nothing that we can control. But the one thing that we can control that we're not doing right is we're just simply missing the boat on love. Tonight, and for the past several months since Slate gave me a call and offered me this opportunity to come and speak, I have had laid on my doorstep one of the truly great challenges that I have had extended to me during my ministerial career. The challenge is to take a passage such as 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and a subject such as love and encapsulate it into a mere 30 to 45 minute talk. The challenge is to expound upon and explain such a complex subject as love in a few simple words and moments. But that's exactly what we're going to try to do tonight. I don't want to discourage or disparage any speakers who have been here before me, nor would I want to do to any who have come after me. But can I just tell you guys something? Your theme, your overall theme is great passages of the Bible. You guys have given me the best. talking about love is something that we don't do enough of, that we need to do more of, and that quite frankly, I'm thrilled to get to do tonight. Now, having put that caveat on that, would you mind if I issued you one more caveat? I want to tell you, I don't have this whole thing figured out. I'm going to be revealing to you a lot of my shortcomings this evening as we go through the list of things that love is. I don't have all the answers, but I don't want you to count my imperfection against me, and I don't want you to tune me out. I want you to understand that the word I bring you tonight, it's not my opinion. It's not commentaries that I've sought out. I didn't go out on the internet and pull up a lesson on love. I've read a few. I'm not going to preach any of those to you. Instead, I would like, if you all don't mind, can we let the text speak and say what the text says? Can we allow Paul, under Spirit-led guidance, to instruct us, educate us, inform us, open our eyes, open our hearts, open our minds, and can we discover a couple of things? Can we reveal, and can we find what love really is? I want to do a few things with you tonight. I want to, first of all, I want to talk to you about what love is. I then want to show you two different types of love that are discussed in this passage. And finally, I want to share with you something about love that you need to know that makes it of such supreme importance in our lives tonight. So let's first begin by talking about what love is. Now, if you've got a Bible in your hand, and I pray that you do, or you've got a phone in your hand, turn Facebook off for a moment and let's log out of Twitter. Let's go to the Bible for a minute and let's pull up 1 Corinthians chapter 13. I want you to do me a favor. I may reference a couple of passages outside of 1 Corinthians 13, but primarily we're going to be right there in that passage. So I want you to keep this open before you tonight because I want you to be able to examine and test what it is that you're being told. So what is love? Let me start here with this great text of the Bible. I worry sometimes that as a society, we have become so familiarized with this passage that we believe this can only be recited at weddings. It was designed, it was written, it was meant for two lovebirds standing before a minister and before a great crowd of witnesses who are eagerly listening to them recite the vows, hear the vows, make the vows, exchange the rings, do the kiss, and walk out the aisle. I worry that that's what we've turned 1 Corinthians chapter 13 into. I worry that we've made it a Hallmark greeting card. You remember greeting cards? We don't send those anymore, right? Well, we usually just send a text. You can drop a Facebook email a whole lot easier than you can put cards in the mail. But Hallmark cards, those greeting cards, many of them used to contain this particular passage, especially focused on verses 4 through 8. And we would send it to perhaps that couple that we watched get married and we now are watching go through the struggles of that first year. You people that have been married a long time, that first year's a little rough, right? You're getting used to somebody. So you may slip that Hallmark greeting card over to them and say, "Remember you said this." And we think that's all this passage is good for. Can I point something out to you? This passage actually was not written to married couples. This passage was actually written to a church in trouble. This text, this chapter, this entire book, nay, letter, was designed for a church at Corinth that was in a lot of trouble. I know sometimes we'll look around at our assemblies and we'll say, we are falling apart at the seams. Let me tell you something. Anytime you start thinking that your church is in trouble, read about the church of Corinth. They had issues in spades. This was a church that had divisions. They had issues on decisions. They had issues on divorce. They had issues on duties of Christians. These people had problems the likes of which we can't fathom. And so, by inspiration of God, Paul sat down and wrote to the church at Corinth. And he wrote to them on a number of these subjects. He tried to straighten them out from a doctrinal standpoint, a theological standpoint. And then we come to this, nearly the end of the book. And I need to point out to you guys, I had never considered this until I got to studying for this lesson. I never thought about the placement of 1 Corinthians 13. Now, these 13 verses, let's just be honest, these things are about love. Top to bottom, stem to stern, they are about love. Love from verse 1 in that clanging, clattering cymbal, all the way down through verse number 13 when we are learning that at the end, faith, hope, and love, the greatest is love. It's interesting where the Spirit inspired Paul to place this. You say, well, where is it that he inspired him to place it? Well, if you go back and you read chapter 12 of 1 Corinthians, there, these folks are being straightened out because you see they had gotten into this bad habit of thinking every Christian is a city unto themselves. You know what I'm talking about, right? They were an island. They didn't need anybody else around them. You ever known those type of people? If you say, no, I haven't, meet me after services. I've got a list, okay? Meet me after services. I'd be happy to provide you with a full list of folks that live with the idea, the concept, the idea that they are all on their own. Well, what that particular chapter, chapter 12, talks about is that no, instead of you being one, you being an individual, you being an arm, you are a body. Many members constituting one body. That's the idea that is being expressed to us in chapter 12. Then in chapter 14, he starts to expound upon, discuss, talk about spiritual gifts. And let me put a heading on this because obviously we know from our studies that those spiritual gifts, many of which are discussed there in chapter 14, those have passed away. Their purpose has been fulfilled. But realistically, if you were to say, Rusty, can you label chapter 14 for me? It's the duties. So what it is you've got in chapter 12, what the church is, chapter 14, what the church does. And bridging the gap between them is love. I'm going to submit to you right off the bat tonight. If you're taking notes, maybe make a note of this. If we don't have love, we have nothing at all. That's the first statement that you need to know about this great thing called love. If the church isn't filled with love, then the church isn't fulfilling its real purpose. There was an interesting statement that I came across in preparation for this lesson. It was made by a gentleman by the name of Hayden Robbins. And here's what, he's a doctor. Of course, let me give him the respect he is due. Dr. Hayden Robinson. And here's what he had to say. He said, the church that is full of love has tackled most of its issues already. But the church that is absent of love is just beginning to find out what issues really are. You see, where love exists, that's guidance, that's light, that's God. Where love is not, then we find personal agendas, puffed up people. I want you to notice, beginning there in verse number 1, we're going to note verses 1 through verse 3, and I'll be reading for you here from the New King James, but I'd like to encourage you to follow along. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am become a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. Notice verse number 2. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, watch what the apostle does here. And though, check this out, though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, but I have not love, I am nothing. Notice with me verse 3. And though I bestow my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body, I love this expression, though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. Now you might say, well, Rusty, listen, those are great lead-in verses, and I hope whenever you're talking to those married couples that you're sitting down with, I hope that you read that to them, but I don't see really how this applies to us today. I want you to really look in short at what the apostle is revealing to us. He speaks first of those who speak with the tongues of men and of angels. In other words, those who are divinely inspired, as Paul and Peter and the others of the apostles were back then whenever they were speaking and they were prophesying and they were bringing forth these great and wondrous things. He says that if he's doing it without love, he is nothing more than a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. Look at verse 2. This is speaking of those really who are the teachers, right? Those who are speaking with the prophecies, those who are understanding those deep things of God, those who back in that day were going into the synagogues and they were attempting to change minds, change hearts, change lives. He's speaking to them and he's saying, if you go in and you don't have love, look at the end of that phrase. It says, I am nothing. It's powerful stuff. What about verse 3? There in verse 3, it speaks directly to those who bring and they give all their goods, right? They make the big contributions. They were bringing in the big funds, the big monies, and they were laying it before, and they were even making the grand gesture. Y'all know about the grand gestures here, right? The ones who they're going to do, but they're going to make sure you know they did. You know what I'm talking about? That was these individuals spoken of in verse 3. Points out that you can have all the grand gestures you want and you can make all the big contributions you want. If you're doing it without love, it profits you nothing. Now you say, well again, Rusty, that just really doesn't apply. Do y'all mind if I change a few of these words and make this a little more applicable to what we're doing tonight? Let me put it like this. Verse 1, you can get up and preach the greatest sermon of all time. If you do it without love, you've done it for nothing. You can sit down, verse 2, and have the most in-depth, amazing, mind-blowing, revelatory Bible study of all time. You can stand before a crowd on Sunday mornings, Wednesday nights, and present Bible classes with theories that would blow the minds of the most biblical of scholars. But if you do it without love, you're nothing. And let's get to that third one. You can be the guy who, when the plate is passed, stands up and spikes a $100,000 check into the plate and make sure that everyone sees you do it. You can be the one who sacrifices thing after thing, but if you're doing these things without love, it's nothing. It's empty. In other words, what he's showing us here, that's not love. And if you stop and you consider this, obviously we know that the Bible tells us in 1 John chapter 4, verses 7 and 8, that God is love. None of what we've described thus far in verses 1, 2, or 3. God is anything but a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. God is anything but a braggart who seeks only to be honored above all else for the sake of you honoring Him above all else. We know that God gave, and God did it because He loved. I want you to see what love is here. You say, well, okay, well, what is love? Love, in my estimation, and from what I'm studying here in 1 Corinthians 13, if we were to slap some definitions on this, then first of all, we begin with love is a God who gave. I would submit to you that love is also a lamb who loved his killers. Certainly we know that Jesus in John chapter 1 verse 29 was called that perfect Lamb of God. What is love? Love is a king who loves his subjects despite the fact that they're not worthy. Love is the prince. You know who I'm talking about there, right? The Prince of Peace. Love is the prince who loves his people in spite of the way they treated him. Can I tell you what love is in short? Love is selfless. Not selfish. Love is selfless. Love gives of itself. Love lays itself bare. And love doesn't look for payback and pats on the back. That's what love is. Verses 1 through verse 3. Now, I want to shift our focus just a bit, and I want us to move into what I'm going to classify as the torture portion of the lesson. Because this next part, this ain't going to be fun. I have spent the day with this text. I was telling Slate and Bert ahead of class tonight, I actually had a whole other lesson written that I was going to do. I was going to loosely base a lesson around the song Love Lifted Me. It was a good lesson. It wasn't my favorite that I'd ever written, but it was solid. But then I got to studying verses 4 through verse 7 into the first phrase of verse 8. And I realized that there are two different types of love discussed there. I want to, before we start wrapping things up tonight, before we start shifting into our final point, I want to stop and I want to show you these two different types of love. But I want you to understand something. It was painful for me to study. It's going to be painful for you to hear. It's interesting. As you look beginning at verse number 4, having now understood what love is, God starts to show you what He wants love to look like and the things He doesn't want love to have. And here's what hit me today. All the things that God doesn't want in love, I realized I've got them and I do them. All the things that God says love already is, that's where I'm trying to get to. Let's look and let's take a peek at what it is that God doesn't want in love. It starts off so good there in verse 4. And you think, oh, this is uplifting, this is motivational. Love, according to the New King James, love is long-suffering and love is kind. In there and let's go home. Because reading further is going to cause a certain amount of pain, but we're going to go on. Love does not envy. Stop. Envy is a problem in our society. Envy is a problem in our world. Envy is a problem in the church. We look at one another, and whether we like it or not, whether we admit it or not, we're envious. We are a people that struggle with, I want what you've got. And that's a problem because according to what God is telling us here, love is not supposed to envy. Notice that next phrase. Love does not parade itself. I think most of you are aware that over at Central and Haines City, we used to have a daycare that was associated with the church. Miss Janet Hall ran the daycare for us, and Miss Janet used to have the kids do the coolest thing because a lot of these kids that would, well, not a lot, but some of the kids that came to us, they would have had rough upbringings, low self-esteem. So Miss Janet, whenever the kids did something good, it was the cutest thing. She would say, all right, everybody pat yourself on the back. And she'd have them pat themselves on the back, and they'd say, I'm doing a very good job. That's cute. That's cute in a 4- and 5-year-old. It was adorable whenever my Hadley over here, I got to watch her do that when she was 3 and 4 and was there at the daycare. It gets a little less cute though when we've got 20, 30, 40-year-olds still parading themselves about, patting themselves on the back and talking about how great they really are. It becomes alarming. But here, God says that's not love. Love does not parade itself about. Well, what else? I mean, we're already this far in. We might as well keep going. Love is not puffed up. I was born with a condition called hydrocephalus. They didn't discover it until I was 3 months old. Some of you are maybe going, well, what's hydrocephalus? I bet you if I changed and went back to the politically unfriendly term that they used to use, you'll know what it is: waterheads. Increase of brain fluid upon the brain. It can affect the brain, the brain stem. It can affect the spine. In my case, eventually it did affect the optic nerve. And it did cause a certain amount of big-headedness. Now, here's the other thing you need to know about me. You may look at my head and say, bless his heart, that boy's got hydrocephalus and that. No, listen, my family's got big heads. We all had them. My daddy's got a big... My poor nephew, can I say bless his heart? I'm good. Bless his heart, my poor nephew, whenever he was born, he hit about 10 months old, and that baby would crawl and his head would hang. Have to carry. Didn't have the neck strength to keep that thing up. Again, it was funny in my 10-month-old nephew. It's not so funny when we've got people so puffed up on what they've done that they got to tell you about it. This is the wife who comes home from a long day of work and the husband is standing at the door when she walks in and he says, I have swept the whole house. I have made your dinner. And I have folded those clothes. Did I hear come to my house over here? That ain't happening, by the way. That's love that is doing it for the pat on the back and the attaboy. Folks, that's not what love is. The Bible says love is not puffed up. The Bible also says that love does not behave rudely. Church, I really wish this one wasn't in there. How many times have you experienced it in your own life where incidental rudeness just pops out of your mouth? You're going along, and typically it's when we're having a bad day, doesn't it? You bite the hand of those who love you. Back in Tennessee, we call it cutting your nose off to spite your face. The Bible says that love isn't rude. It doesn't treat those whom it cares about so carelessly. Yet, strangely, we are still doing this today. Love does not seek its own. In other words, it's not looking to get what it can get out of a situation. It's not looking to do something so that it can get something back. Does this sound familiar at all? If you're in here tonight and you're saying, man, that sounds like what I did earlier, don't do that again. That's not real love. That's love according to the world's standards. You do for me, I will do for you. You, what is it, scratch my back? I'll scratch yours. It's not love. The Bible also says that love is not provoked. Again, this one hurts because sometimes it is so easy to say, you hurt me, I'm done with you. How often do we take and we misapply that passage about letting the dust fall from your sandals? We make that our first step. Well, why? Well, because you hurt my feelings. Let me tell you something. Anybody that knows me will be, I'm not breaking new ground. Anybody that knows me, they'll tell you, I'm an emotional person. I'm a feelings-oriented guy. I can hear it in your voice how you care about me, and 9 times out of 10, I'll tell you something. To be blind, I've got an awfully expressive face because people know where I stand. Feelings get hurt, don't they? I love the flip side of this particular thing that love is not. Love is not provoked, which means that love is forgiving. Whew. They get hot in here all of a sudden. Toes get a little sore. I love it whenever I'm talking to someone and they almost seem to live with the concept and the idea that a preacher never struggles with forgiveness. Well, you read the Bible all the time. You study all the time. You preach every Sunday. You've got this figured out, right? Wrong. If anything, I know how far off I really am. And I know that I'm not as forgiving as I should be. I know that my love is provoked. And I know that I've got to get better at this, but I also know that I'm not the only one. Love is not provoked. Love does not think evil. How often is it the case that we jump straight to the worst conclusion? Do we have any gloom and doomers in here? Anybody want to confess it? Don't raise your hands. If you're a gloom and doomer, say me. Are you going to admit to it? Okay, there we go. All right. Everybody else got to come forward at the end of this lesson now. We got us an honor. Listen, gloom and doom, it happens. We get that opinion, don't we? We live out the hee-haw song on a regular basis. Gloom, despair, and what? Agony on me. Absolutely. We get to thinking this because our minds naturally jump to the worst possible conclusion. We watch two people whispering across the room. What do? They're talking about me. We see a note get passed from one hand to another. That note was about me. We jump straight to the worst thoughts about one another. Folks, love does not do that. And I'm not talking here about marriages and friendships. I'm talking about in the church. It's the one place where I ought to be able to give somebody the benefit of the doubt, but for whatever reason, it's the one place where rarely I'm willing to do that. I don't understand that concept. Look at verse 6. Whew. Love does not rejoice in iniquity. Love's not looking to watch somebody get into sin, stay into sin, and help them do all that they can to remain where they're at. Love's not looking to rejoice in evils done, in bad stuff. Love's looking to uplift and say, look at what the rest of the verse is. Love rejoices in truth. This is what hurt me today getting ready for this lesson. This is what had me shaking and quaking on the way over here. We went to some gas station and we stopped and we were getting ready to leave. Delaney and the kids had gone in. I stayed out and pumped the gas and got back in the car and was reading my notes. And they came back out and I am fidgeting. Again, if you know me, you know that before I preach, I am always fidgeting. Okay, if you know me, you know I'm always fidgeting, period. I don't have to preach. But I was all over the place. My feet were bopping. I was back and forth in the seat. I was flipping with my hands, doing this, doing that. Delaney finally looks at me. She says, "You're going to do fine." I tell you what, I don't think it had much to do with the fact that I was going to have to stand before you folks and preach. It had everything to do with the fact that I was going to have to preach on this. This passage, I know it's beautiful, and I know that many of you had it read at your wedding. But this passage also gives you a look inside yourself, and sometimes what you see is not good. Sometimes what you find when you glimpse in the mirror is that you've got a spot on your face and it needs to be fixed. So here, the Bible has shown us that bad side of love. We'll call that the human side of love. But can I share with you? Can I show you real quick? Listen, I'm not going to leave you on that gloom and doom note. It's just not going to happen. I want to show you what God's love looks like, because this is what we're angling for. We want to get rid of those negatives, right? We want to take away all that envy, and we want to take away and stop parading around. We want to shrink the size of the head. We want to make sure that we're not patting ourselves on the back. All you get from that's a dislocated shoulder. We want to make certain that as we go forward, we've eliminated the bad things. So now, tell me, what does love look like from God's point of view? What does God look like in action, in love? Start back in verse 4. Let's jump back up there. Love suffers long and is kind. Is there anyone who would care to stand tonight and give us testimony, give us witness, give us evidence, give us scripture that argues against the idea that our God is long-suffering when it comes to His people? There's no case to be made, is it? Our God has done and continues to see us through so much when we offer back so little. I love the second half of that, is kind. I love the imagery there because it gets you thinking about little things. Whenever I think of a kindness, I think about little things. I'll never forget. I'm going to tell this story on. Where's Darlene McKee? Okay, all right. Now, you're done. You're done. I just need to find you. All right. A few years ago, well, 2 years ago now, I turned 40. And Miss Darlene happened to know that my very, 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 very favorite treat in the entire world is what, Darlene?
Chocolate-covered cherries.
Chocolate-covered. And I do not share. I will bite you. I have done it. And I am not apologizing for that at all. Love is okay to do that, okay? But that year, it was my 40th birthday, so the church, they did this big, beautiful thing for me. And Darlene and Bert went behind my back, which, by the way, it's really not hard to pull one over on a blind person, typically. Just do it and do it quiet, and you're most of the time fine. They had people bring in 40 boxes of chocolate-covered I ate them things until it hurt me. Matter of fact, I ate so many. I now can't eat chocolate-covered cherries anymore. They're off my diet. But I think about kindness. I think about the little things that get done for us. I think about those little moments. I think about the time that someone will come to you when they know you're down, and a brother or sister comes and they don't ask you what it is that's going on. They just hug you. Or when you go to the mailbox, you open that mailbox and there is that greeting card. Maybe you pop open that phone and it has been a horrible day and you get the sweetest text from somebody. With me, most of my good stuff involves these three girls over here. I love those times when either of my kids, it's usually my little one because my big one's about to hit, well, she's 13. She tolerates Daddy. It's sweet of her. I love her for that. But my little one, she'll come and she'll love on you and hug you. And so will my big one. She just does it in a slightly different way. The other day, Delaney came home. She had gone to the store for something for herself. And Darlene, I've got a new favorite thing now. I've got these gummy bears that are gluten-free. Gluten-free gummy bears. They are amazing. Went to Walmart the other day, placed an order at Walmart. They come out, they bring it to the car for us because we were doing the online. And they bring it out. And everything's there on Father's Day but my gummies. They were out of stock. Yes, I had a meltdown. I got over it and we all moved on. But Delaney went to the store yesterday. She didn't have to do this. She picked me up a bag of those that I like. Can I ask you to do me a favor? Please think about all of the little things and kindnesses that God has done for you. Think about the times that you get up, you get to go in those kids' rooms before they wake up, and you get to just stand there. Think about the fact that you may have a bad dream in the middle of the night. You can wake up, you can still reach over, and there that special he or she is. Think about the fact that tonight you're going to go home and you're going to go into a house and it's going to have a nice roof over it. You're going to drive there in a nice car. You're going to be able to afford a meal. God's love is kind. But not only that, listen, we would be remiss here this evening if we did not address verse number 7. You talking about a verse that'll take your breath away. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. I love the fact that as I was going through this lesson today and as I kept hitting so many of my faults, my rudeness, my arrogance, I kept coming across times that I pat myself on the back or my envy. I love the fact that I hit verse 7 and my God bears with me. I love the fact that His belief in me still exists. Matter of fact, He believed in me enough that He sent His Son to die for me. I love that He hopes in in a relationship with me. I love the fact that He endures despite my shortcomings. I love the fact that I can see my God's love played out in these annals of Scripture. Listen, when viewed from our point of view and our perspective, 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7 is tough. But I love to look at it from God's point of view. It gives me a goal. It gives me a hope. And it gives me an objective. Let me get out the bad. Let me put in the good. And let me be more like my God and His Son. But there's one more thing I want to talk to you guys about, and this one will be brief. But I want to talk to you real quick about just that first phrase in verse number 8. Love never fails. When everything else is gone, when we stand before the judgment seat, and it's that time that I'm speaking of, is when that every knee has been bowed, every tongue is confessing. It's the time past what I'm going to call the time past faith, because now, at that moment, everybody knows it, right? The substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, you're seeing it at that moment, right? It's that moment past faith. It's that moment past biblical hope, which is really disguised in the guise of expectation. Because expectation is fulfilled. This is what will remain. When faith has served its purpose, when hope has reached its goal, love remains forever and never fails. I tell you what, some of the hardest words in a father's lexicon are "I can't." My kids, Hadley especially here lately, she'll have something that she wants to do and it'll be putting something together. I love it when the subject is batteries. I can put batteries in anything. But anything past that, I have to sometimes look at her and say, I'm sorry, I can't. My abilities have failed you. My capabilities have failed you. But my love for you will never fail you. Can I ask you this? And I want you to contemplate this, because we're beginning to land the ship now. Okay? We're bringing the plane in. But I want you to think about what I'm fixing to ask. How much more good for the Lord could we do if our primary focus was not silly semantics and arguments and debates, but was instead love? Love for one another, love for the Lord's church, and love for a Savior who died for us. Folks, if that's our primary focus, if that guides our agenda, if that is what we're shooting for, if love is at the heart of all we do, it can't fail. You say, how do you know that? Well, this children's song says it best, because the Bible tells me so. Love never fails. I want to, as I'm wrapping up, I want to thank you guys again. I appreciate you letting me take a few moments to discuss with you, in essence, faith, and to an extent, hope, but love, the greatest of all. I want to thank you for allowing me to elucidate for just a few moments on 1 Corinthians 13 and what it is that it has to say there. I pray that you learned something about what love is. I pray that you learned at least a little something about what it looks like. Mind if I point something out to you that I don't think any of you picked up on? Does anyone find it odd that y'all called in a blind man to tell you what something looked like? Anyone? Just me? I've laughed a lot about it, probably more than I should. But I pray that you've gotten a glimpse at what love really looks like. I understand that I have the privilege and the honor right now of extending an invitation to you. Here's the beautiful thing about this invitation. This invitation is born out of love. It's an invitation that is from the lips of Jesus when He says, "Come unto me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." You are carrying a burden that you are ill-equipped to bear. But, love bears all. The love that Jesus has for you can bear that which you are unable to bear on your own. Tonight, you have an opportunity to make things right in your life. Tonight, you have an opportunity to experience real, authentic, undeniable, inarguable, everlasting love. I don't know what your needs are. I don't know what it is that you need assistance with, whether it be obedience to the gospel. If so, I've often told the folks over at Central, I'll tell you all this, we don't have to wait for Sunday. Obedience can take place at any time. If you're here tonight and you've never obeyed the gospel, tonight's the night for you. Don't wait till Sunday, do it tonight. You're here tonight and you've strayed away. You got to believe in that love's not real. Love is so real. I want to encourage you. If there is a need that you have, if there is a means by which you need to be assisted, we would encourage and invite. Won't you let your need be known as we sing the song of invitation?